This boss fight is amazing. Amascut the Devourer is a boss fight released last week for teams of up to 5 players, which is probably the strongest emphasis on team coordination than any other boss Giants have released in the game. And I really wanted to make a video purely just singing its praises, but due to a lack of time, I've opted for the critical feedback route. And I just want to at least reference here straight away though, before getting into that this boss is incredible. It sparked my love for PVMing in this game. It takes me back to the Virago era of forming teams and groups to take on the new boss, climb its difficulty curve, and earn some loot on the way. But does Amascut have too many insta-kill mechanics? And what's the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to insta-kill or team wipe mechanics in player versus monster encounters? Let's delve into this topic area today with this video, and this applies to all MMORPG boss designs and PvE activities. I hear people complaining about the sheer volume of insta-kills this boss fight has, and that even includes myself in the teams that I've formed and been a part of in certain scenarios of this boss fight, definitely not all, and I'm going to go through my take of, what I like and what I don't like, and where I think improvements could be made. But again, a lot of this, which I'll cover, is likely stuff that has been mentioned in focus groups or playtests or even, JMods discussing amongst themselves when making purposeful decisions on the design philosophy here and the boss design. So, some of this stuff will probably never go in, but some of my feedback here is actually just like polishing and fine tuning some areas, which I think could, lead to a better experience for players. Other areas are just kind of agreeing with, well, this is obviously a clear boss design. Is this the right route to go? And, it'd be really nice to hear from you guys in the comment section about how you feel. But overall, I'm loving the feeling of the fight as a whole. But let's delve into this deeper. My overall takeaway is that the boss has a lot of technical mechanics which require group coordination, and some of these are tied to insta-kill mechanics, which if done incorrectly will wipe your group. It's punishing, but it also feels very rewarding with a sense of progression each time you get past an insta-kill and time things correctly with your team. It has a very close resemblance to how it feels to do mythic raiding progression on World of Warcraft, where you reach a certain mechanic, you learn how to overcome it with the team and adapt strategies to suit your team setup, and once you overcome it, you can get past that, or you can get to that point and tend to get past that point more often than not, bar the exception of some major mistakes made by individual players. So then it comes down to the teams who succeed more are those who make fewer mistakes and can lock in to become more consistent. You can have those meme kills, I've had plenty with my team, and have fun with it, but for the most part, if you want consistent loot or you want to climb in rage, you're gonna have to lock in, especially if you want to climb in rage. And so what you'll find is, insta-kills aren't going anywhere, but what you'll find is some of the time leniency is a lot greater on lower in rages. So people will, opt, if they're in the mood and the right mindset with the team, they'll opt for the 2k in rage, let's say, to go through high intensity locked in mode gameplay. And then if they want to chill out a little bit and kind of stretch out those margins and make it a bit more comfortable, maybe lower the HP of mobs again to make it easier to kill them off before an insta-kill mechanic, elements like that, then they'll lower the enrage for farm kills, as it's referred to farm loot, have higher guaranteed chance of being successful, can relax a little bit, not have to be as locked in, and can just farm for that GP. Or for those drops if you're an Iron Man. But let's get back to this summary. So each person has a role to play right in this boss fight, and having more players up to 5 can in some cases lead to higher chances of success, or responsibility spread across more players. This boss has more team wipe mechanics than any boss released to date. I think there may be a tad too many, and I'll touch on a couple of areas I think could be improved or some leeway put in there. But as a concept, with the right balance, it can add a lot to a team fight. It requires added coordination of when to attack, click, or engage with a mechanic. It adds a lot of technical, mechanical weighting to the fight rather than it only being a DPS race or just feeling like you could just be there by yourself and it doesn't even matter about the people around you. An example of that, which is fine because it's like a boss rush mode, is Sanctum, where it's solo but can also be done in a group. When I'm there with Joe, with Chewy, he literally, you could probably just press him on screen or something and him disappear and I'd continue the fight in a very similar way. We're not actually influencing in too many ways the fight, amongst each other. We're almost just there doing our own thing and having to deal with maybe when a person slows down or makes a mistake, we're having to deal with that HP scaling. But other than that, we're kind of doing our own thing or a similar thing that you would do in a solo encounter of that same fight. Whereas this fight, requires you to coordinate with your teammates in a similar way to Solak or Virago. But that's why I say similar, because even those fights can be soloed now, and this fight goes to the extreme where some mechanics absolutely require another person. What Amascut does well is that it allows teams to carry out the mechanics without a huge amount of DPS pressure in those scenarios. So coordination becomes the main factor, and then it creates those clear DPS windows separately to allow the team to optimize those moments where better teams or players will excel or did excel early on due to that coordination. Their recent change or fix to phase 6 where damaging the core doesn't have the same impact on Amascut's underlying green HP is a clear design choice, making teams maximize their DPS window almost 3 times in that phase rather than pretty much once before the change. Overall though, making those DPS windows very clear to the team allows players to optimize those moments of the fight. This is great for teaching people when to and how to optimize their cooldown usage of ultimates such as Sunshine for Mage. They also provide very clear visual cues when it's an insta-kill mechanic rather than a sign of life, oh, you've taken too much damage, carry on if you survive the damage. So it's a heavy technical fight, which is fine, but there are 1 or 2 of those areas which could be fine-tuned to feel more fair or not be as punishing. And I'll come to those 2 later. It's mostly in relation to the light stealer dogs on phase 5, which I think many of you would agree are infuriating, when something goes wrong there. And it generally doesn't feel that fair in those moments. I know a lot of teams have been bypassing it with preparing, like having a couple of Necros on the team and preparing a Threads of Fate, AoE, insta-kill, deathmark rotation, and that really nukes them. But, there are still some areas that could be fine-tuned, and we'll go into that. So overall, I'm okay with, insta-kill mechanics in a boss fight, bar the exception of, one major area, the light stealer dogs in phase 5. And I think they could tone down, like another area as well, where Amascut is leaping around due to desync and other things going on, which can lead to frustration when you've got to block her attacks from hitting Tumekan on phase 5. So that's kind of like my overall take. And I'm going to delve into a couple of areas now a bit deeper. But before I do that, make sure to let me know some high-level takes below in your comments, or make sure you let me know at the end of this video. So what do insta-kill mechanics create? Well, they create a really clear binary outcome. You're either going to work out the tactic to overcome it and survive, or you're just going to flat out die and wipe your team, right? It's a pretty clear binary outcome. You don't kill X in time, you insta-die. You don't click X in time, you get insta-killed. You don't pass on the buff in time, you get damaged too much, and then it turns into just a complete insta-kill because it doesn't even let you take that many hits, right? In terms of the Tumekan debuff, in terms of the Amascut debuff, sorry. So this creates a very clear path to progression. You figure out what's causing the insta-kill, and you progress past it until you hit another roadblock. It does make for very good, clear progression, and the boss is gated heavily by those technical mechanics. So this creates excitement and engagement no matter what the enrage. It teaches players to engage with those technical mechanics without the ability to completely bypass them with DPS. Obviously, this becomes easier or more relaxed at lower enrages, but you get what I'm saying. It does affect pretty much most enrage tiers in the hard mode version of Amascut. It can become a tad annoying though when you begin farming content. And for WoW raiders out there, that's referred to as re-clearing for loot or GP. It's not actually progression raiding. It's not progression bossing. So I think this is one of the first scenarios in the game where we've got this like heavy volume, heavy quantity, of insta-kill mechanics, which give you clear progression milestones. And when you overcome those, it's very exciting and engaging and very clear of what's happening. And it's really clear, like you get that progression mindset, especially if you're staying at like that high 2k enrage from the get-go, like we did in week 1 in that world's first challenge difficulty. You're going in at 2k and you're constantly hitting those roadblocks, and then you're figuring out that insta-kill mechanic and how to overcome it with your team setup. And then once you get past it, it's that progression mindset. And that feeling, I mean, there's no better feeling than that. The first time you're doing it and the first time you accomplish that kill. When it comes to farming, It's a little bit of a different mentality. And a lot of people, especially on RuneScape, it is just one boss. You're not progressing through like easier bosses before you get to the last 2 hard ones, and you're not getting loot from easier bosses before you get to the last one. You're literally farming the same boss over and over again. And I guess a way around that is to lower that in rage, right? Lower the difficulty, make the farming easier. But those insta-kill mechanics are still there, and that can get a tad annoying if you've got a high quantity of them in a fight. And I think for the large part, that's what a lot of people, including myself, kind of feel when you start farming and you lose a kill due to one of those insta-kill mechanics, because you're not actually you're not doing a progression fight at that moment because you've already cleared it at a high in rage. You're actually just farming, and it's very frustrating when you lose a kill. But, you know, ultimately, what would you prefer? That huge excitement from progression, that progression mindset, and having to deal with it on farming, or would you just like to strip away and not have that huge excitement from progression? Like, I personally really like the progression mindset. I know that's not everybody. Farming is important, is a really important factor of this game, and how enjoyable it is to farm a boss over and over again to go for a particular piece of loot. And that's why I think some of these areas they could fine tune a bit. And also why this becomes such a, you know, a hot topic for debate. I think maybe a way around it, you know, it's almost, it kind of shocked me. This is coming off the spot now. It actually shocked me when my team, when we went in, when we were doing the 2K World's First Challenge difficulty, and then the Enrage mode came out after after Evil Lucario's team managed to defeat the boss. We then went to a lower Enrage, and we were shocked to see that 100% included all phases. That actually shocked us. I think a way around this, they maybe could have staggered out how many insta-kill mechanics are actually in the fight as you go up through the Enrages. Now, yes, they have a lot more leniency with the time in terms of killing the chain, taking, you know, the lesser god buff from the statue and then empowering the statue. That whole phase, it's like P3 and 4. They are a lot more lenient on lower Enrages, and that is one way which they've kind of reduced the impact and the feeling of the insta-kill mechanic. Absolutely, and that's really good, JS. It's really props to JMoz there. That's a really good thing. Maybe they could have reduced some of those other insta-kill mechanics on the lower Enrages too to allow for that farming. But then, you know, at the same time, if they go and do that, there is a balancing issue there. You know, you're going to really have to give people who are doing those 2K Enrages a much higher chance for loot at the end of the day, because there is such a higher chance of failing the kill if there's more insta-kill mechanics in the fight. So instead, they've just opted for, you know, a similar amount of insta-kill mechanics regardless of the Enrage, probably to kind of balance that out a bit. And then also maybe just to kind of make it a lot clearer to people earlier on that, hey, these are going to be here all the way through, and you're going to have to learn it now with a bit more leniency, because later on, it's going to be a lot tighter in terms of the times and the damage checks. I went on a bit of a ramble there, but effectively what I'm alluding to is, if that mechanic isn't as polished as it could be, it starts to become frustrating in those farming scenarios. I mean, yeah, absolutely in progression scenarios as well, but even more so, like it really brings it to the spotlight when you're farming kills over and over again. And so if the design of that particular insta-kill scenario seems unfair and it's not addressed, then it can lead to a lot of frustration. And this video is going to touch on a couple of those areas that could be polished, I think, to reduce frustration. And honestly, a lot of this comes down to phase 5 for me, where there could be a lot more polish and fine-tuning of these insta-kill mechanics to improve the overall fight. Also, technically, this is one of the most chillest phases as well. Funnily enough, it's actually one of the most chill phases, yet also could be polished more. So let's touch on the dreaded light stealer dogs. Those are those little small flipping dogs that are constantly spawning, and they spawn, the rate at which they spawn and the volume is based on how many conduits you have charged up ready to go, or how many you are charging up. It's very frustrating. It's very frustrating not being able to damage them on the stairs, or being able to freeze them but not damage them. You know, 2 simple changes here. Either don't allow us to freeze or do anything until they can be damaged, or just let us damage them as soon as they are on the stairs. Yes, it would make it a little bit easier making that decision. A way of balancing that could be to increase the health a little bit, you know, but ultimately those are 2 areas that, you know, 2 simple changes that could be made, one or the other, that would improve that scenario and make it less frustrating. And I'm sure they're working on a hotfix for that already. Also, another frustration is, when the dogs aren't appearing for some people, but they are for others. Obviously, if you've targeted it, I think it prioritizes it to appear. And target cycling becomes very, very important in this scenario to an extent, depending on how many of those bigger acts, those bigger dogs are about. But I think, again, one way which they could fix this is by prioritizing that the light stealer dogs are always on the top highest layer above everything for everybody to see at all times, because they are the most important thing in that particular scenario. And if they are not dead, or they're in the way between Amascut and Tumekan, or they reach a flipping Tumekan fragment and start to explode on it, like those are the moments that will cause a team wipe. And so with that being the most vital component in that scenario, I think it's only fair on the players that they can see those mobs at all times. And everybody can see the same thing regardless of their perspective, so they can communicate it. I've been in scenarios where I've been able to see it and I'm attacking it, and no one, and two of my other teammates can't see it. Or the other way around, where a teammate's attacking it and it's stuck under a mob, but because they've managed to click on it, they can see it and they're damaging it with the health bar, and I can't see it. And people are like, what just happened? And you go and watch the VOD back from different perspectives and you can see what's happening. So whether they've hotfixed that already, I'm not sure, but I strongly believe the light stealer dog should be at the highest layer in terms of everything else, above players, Amascut, and familiars. One way which other games just counter this outright is by having unit frames, and unit frames are effectively boxes on the screen that show any health bar of priority mobs or sub mobs, like elite bosses, things like that. So other targets other than the boss will appear on a unit frame, so you know they exist and you know what their health bar is. That would obviously be very useful as well for the clones, and target cycling has become exceptionally amazing in that moment. You target cycle, keybind it to tab if you used to tab targeting games. And I tab target through the clones there and can just see the health bars of them because they're all stacked on each other. And it's a bit messy, especially if you do the stack tactic to get more AoE, which I strongly recommend. Then having target cycling there is amazing. Okay, the next instance is also in phase 5. And this is an area that could be completely toned down. For better or for worse, let me know in the comments. Especially, it's interesting to look at this from a design angle as well. Player experience should definitely be, up there. But then what balancing issues does that cause down the line? So this one could, this kind of suggestion could completely remove this as an insta-kill mechanic. So in phase 5, if the person empowered by Tumekan, aka the screen goes gold, doesn't block Amascut, who is trying to destroy Tumekan, maybe it should just fragment Tumekan again, and the entire loop either gets reset, and therefore you just lose time, or you literally lose that rotation of damaging Amascut. And as a result, this will likely make your last phase more difficult, as you'll likely go into that phase with higher green health points on Amascut, but it still allows you to carry on the fight. It allows the chance to recover the kill if you are good enough. And that could be a good thing. It almost like, it's a bit more creative, right? So rather than just insta-killing you and you losing, especially in phase 5, I mean, you've got past the hard bits, currently in the current sandbox of the boss. You've got past, P3 and 4, and all those rotations going on there. You're in P5, you're in the chill phase, except for the flipping light stealer dogs. So, this, by rather than like team wiping and causing an insta-kill, it could just be punishing by you losing out on that time to damage Amascut, right? What does this impact? Well, it makes it more punishing the higher in rage you go. Whether that's a good thing or not, I'm unsure. It's probably something they've thought about, as it makes, the lower in rages a lot easier to farm, because it removes an insta-kill mechanic, and you don't even need all 4 damage windows in phase 5 anyway when it comes to conduit charging. So it's much harder to recoup the damage at higher HP pools when you compare to those lower in rages. Only the very experienced PVMers will probably be able to recoup a 2000% enrage P7 right now with current game strategies with this method, but it at least gives them the chance to do that, and it really sets those players apart. It allows them to, have a chance of recovering in P7. There was a moment where I was doing a 750% kill, and me and a mate, Dia, we were the last 2 standing, and we had about, 750k or 800k of health left to do. And so we had to do that much damage between the two of us whilst dealing with, some weird conduits and whatever conduits we got. I think we got Scabaras, which is like literally the worst one you can get. And we managed to, get the kill. We recovered the entire kill. We decided to continue and carry on. So I think there is a level of satisfaction that you can get as a team and as players, those people who are still standing, or in those scenarios where, okay, you mess it up. Okay, my bad. I messed it up. I didn't get there in time, or, oh, this game sucks, like with desyncing and there was a guy right next to me and it went to him first. Something like that, like either one. But as a team, you manage to pull it together and recover it. Now, on farm kills, again, you're going to have a much higher chance of recovering compared to higher enrage kills. But again, if they balance that with rewarding people, again, with that risk-reward system, where on higher enrages, you've got a higher drop rate. You've got a better drop rate of getting those rares, then, I feel like that could be a better experience. So this is a scenario which I thought of straight away, which could be changed from an insta-kill into okay, can you recover this kill? So I guess what I'm debating there is having the right balance in boss design between volume of insta-kill mechanics versus, okay, this could be a really good scenario here where players feel amazing at recovering this kill. And it rewards the player's level of skill, engagement, and knowledge of the overall boss fight to know if they can recover that kill in that moment as well. Or whether it's all right, guys, let's teleport. We need to teleport out here. We ain't recovering this with this current team setup, or due to how badly it's gone. Another one up for debate is if you end up solo in phase 7 with the Tumekan debuff, there is literally no recovery. You have to just hope that the boss's health is low enough for you to out DPS the boss before it kills you with the Tumekan debuff, if you're the last one standing. Now, this one I'm less annoyed about, as it is a group boss at the end of the day. If you end up solo, there isn't really much solo recovery. I guess the argument that people play, and I spoke to Wazzy about this, is that if you get any of the other lesser gods, you've got a chance of recovering it. Whereas if you get Tumekan, it's a pretty much no-go. If you get hit 8 times, I think it is, you get an insta-killed, and if the boss's health isn't low enough to recover, then that's it, game over. But I think overall, I think it's a punishment that is kind of warranted. It is a group boss, and if you're the last man standing, it's unlikely you're going to get the kill, and I'm kind of fine with that. An issue overall with group play, however, 2K and Rage and above, is that you can't use intercept or heal other either until the last phase. And the reason why I'm flagging, why this has made me think of this here, is because Tumekan, it's like a debuff, that's an insta-kill mechanic, but other scenarios where, I don't know, the team gets lower and lower, like, can you recover it by helping each other out, having a really good healer in the group? Well, in RuneScape, not so much. Last phase, the debuff, the Tumekan debuff, does get removed and you're allowed to intercept again and heal other. It'll be interesting to see if some crazy strategies come out, and I do envision that will happen. So like on the 4K in Rage progression road to 4K in Rage for teams, like people will start being creative with intercept and heal other, I think, in P7 and different things like that. I'm pretty certain the debuff isn't there anymore. Maybe they reinstill it, I don't know, for higher enrages. But RS doesn't have a clear or balanced healer role, or class in the game like other RPGs. So it will always be handicapped in this area. At the same time, it can be seen as a strength of the game, though, how versatile you can play on one character. But, some bosses back in the day, and this boss included, did start to introduce base tank roles. Effectively, you are the main tank of the boss. Base tank always referred to you being the main tank, or one of the main tanks, and tending to be within melee distance. With Amascut, you don't need to be. The current meta for that tank role right now is to go full tank setup with opting in for as much damage reduction as possible, especially the higher in rage as you go. And, Giants are starting to introduce even more diversity with like Necromancy now also being able to play a support class, putting on debuffs onto the bosses. The Nexus that has now been released with Amascut as a drop. If you get that Nexus, it changes your Ghost into providing a bigger damage buff for the group. It strips away the healing that you get from it, so it's a sacrifice, it's a trade-off, but it's a fantastic trade-off for group scenarios where you don't need that individual survivability as much, and instead, it actually pays off to get more group-wide damage output on the boss. And I absolutely love that. I don't know about you guys, but like when Chewie switched to Necro and started like doing some of that stuff and had a look at Evil Lucaro and how he was doing it, you know, ultimately he was opting in for keeping up debuffs on the boss and buffs on his team for overall team success, right? To increase the chances of success. And that has a massive impact if everybody's doing 10% more damage on that boss, you know, across a fight which is that long, on a boss that has that much HP, 12 million HP on 2000 in Rage. Well, let's get back to the topic here. This is now a 25-minute video. This is insane, but you know, maybe people will watch this. I don't know. So the last point, I like how the boss is very technical and has clear DPS windows, right? It's good to have this on a group boss. Damage matters, don't get me wrong, and it matters a lot more at higher rages, as with lower damage, you're gonna make your P7, your phase 7 last phase, exceptionally more difficult. That's the punishing factor of lower damage, and it allows a clear visual indication, HP-wise, health point-wise, to teams of either needing to optimize more in certain areas or making sure to cycle through the conduits in phase 5 one at a time to allow for more damage windows. Those choices and coordination with teammates is what really sets this boss apart, and I've loved every single minute of it. So guys, I'm going to end there. You know, knowing how long this video has got, those are my thoughts. I like the clear progression milestones that overcoming team wipes provides, but too many can get you thinking whether there are more creative ways to implement progression. And some need to be fine-tuned, i.e. the lifestealer dogs in phase 5. What have you guys thought about the new boss? Make sure to give this video a like, subscribe, and let me know in the comment section below. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Good luck with loot and your progression.